faithfully sharing insights, exploring great books worldwide. Hey there, I'm Sally, and this is my book show. In the last episode, I covered the first half of Emperor Meiji's life for you. From a young age, Emperor Meiji got traditional Japanese noble education, and he learned modern science and politics too. This helped the nation navigate the chaos at the shogunate's end, build a modern capitalist state, and start becoming strong. So, what's Japan's next move? And what role will Emperor Meiji play?
Next up, I'll keep explaining for you.
Earlier, we discussed the big shifts in modern Japan, tied to Western powers forcing open the country and making unfair treaties. Back then, Japan was seen by Western powers just like China or Southeast Asia, backward nations ripe for plundering. Once Japan modernized in politics and economy with the Meiji Restoration, the top priority was boosting its global image and status. So, the Meiji government took two approaches: diplomacy and military. First up, diplomacy. After Perry forced Japan open, it made unfair deals with countries like Britain, France, America, Russia, over a dozen in total. These deals stripped Japan of rights, like control over its own tariffs. If foreigners broke laws in Japan, Japan couldn't enforce or judge them. So, the Meiji government accepted the treaties at first, but only as a stopgap. Their real aim was to renegotiate for equal standing with the West. In December 1872, Japan sent a mission led by Iwakura Tomomi to tour Europe and America. One goal was to demonstrate to them Japan was now a full-fledged modern nation, hoping they'd redo the treaties. But that didn't happen. The U.S. refused, using Japan's flawed justice system as an excuse. Extraterritorial rights in Japan, and Britain pushed harder for more gains. Meiji saw that the West still didn't see them as equals. To renegotiate, Japan needed to shift its Western image, and soon a chance came. In July 1879, President Ulysses S. Grant of the U.S. came to Japan. Even though Grant was tarnished by corruption and quit, to unaware Japanese, he remained the Civil War hero, a shining president, and the first foreign leader ever to visit Japan. To achieve this, Japan prepared a high-profile reception to showcase its civilized image to foreigners. Just how grand was it? For instance, at Grant's welcoming ceremony in Japan, the 21-year-old Emperor Meiji unprecedentedly stepped forward and shook hands with him. Before this, when meeting royalty from Britain, Russia, or Germany, Meiji always used formal imperial etiquette, waiting for envoys to bow. Never such approachable behavior. This friend-like treatment deeply moved Grant, but observant Americans noticed Meiji's gesture wasn't natural. It felt like a calculated performance. One accompanying American writer noted that after shaking hands, Emperor Meiji returned to position, almost motionlessly. His expression was stiff, almost awkward. That's the look of someone trying hard to do something perfectly for the first time. Clearly, Meiji was striving to present Japan's friendly side, even to the point of seeming artificial to observers. Fortunately, their effort paid off. Grant stated he was deeply impressed and believed nations should treat Japan equally. Additionally, Grant empathetically advised Meiji, avoid heavy borrowing from Europe to prevent future blackmail and forced concessions. But also actively recruit foreign STEM talent, their vital assets for Japan's development. Meiji clearly heeded this. When new finance minister Okuma Shigenobu proposed a 50 million yen foreign loan to ease fiscal pressure, Meiji instantly rejected it, partly due to Grant's warning. And now, Grant's visit was undeniably a major success. His activities and speeches spread through media, helping shift Western perceptions of Japan. While Grant's visit mattered as the first by a foreign head of state, King Kalakaua of Hawaii's trip entered Japanese history differently. In March 1881, King Kalakaua arrived in Japan for his visit. Back then, Hawaii was still an independent kingdom, but faced huge pressure from American expansion. To avoid being swallowed by the U.S., King Kalakaua was determined to create an Asian alliance to fight Western colonizers. During his time in Japan, he laid out his ideas plainly to Emperor Meiji. He suggested forming an Asian alliance with Japan, China, Thailand, India, and Persia, led by Emperor Meiji. Emperor Meiji was really drawn to this idea. Even though he knew pulling it off would be super tough, Japan's clout wasn't enough to hold that leadership role. But no doubt, Kalakawa's plan deeply inspired Meiji and his successors. Later, Japan's expansionist moves were all tangled up with this Asian alliance vision. In the end, Kalakawa and Emperor Meiji signed the Japan-Hawaii Friendship Treaty, where Hawaii abolished extraterritorial rights and let Japanese citizens immigrate there. This treaty was modern Japan's first equal pact with a foreign country, marking a major leap in diplomacy. With Grant's visit and the Hawaii Treaty as key diplomatic wins, the Meiji government kept pushing hard to revise those treaties. In 1883, Japan opened a Western-style building called Rokumekan in Tokyo, a fancy social club hosting balls to entertain diplomats and merchants from Europe and America. Big shots like Ito Hirobumi and Inoue Kaworu often showed up with families to cozy up to the West, and even Emperor Meiji and the Empress started throwing Western concerts, inviting officials to holiday events. At that time, Japan mainly wanted to scrap extraterritoriality and control its tariffs, while Western nations griped about limited port access. Foreigners couldn't trade or live outside designated areas. So the Meiji government proposed opening Japan's interior in exchange for Western powers giving up extraterritorial rights. Countries like the US, Germany, and Russia agreed, but British envoy Sir Harry Parkes stubbornly refused. With Britain throwing wrenches in the works, progress on treaty revisions crawled along. By the late 1880s, as tensions with Russia flared up in the Far East, Britain had to swallow its pride to win Japan over against Russia, finally rethinking ties. But what really pushed Japan forward wasn't diplomacy, it was military might. Next up, let's see how Japan handled military expansion. As an island nation with limited space and resources, Japan tried expanding outward multiple times in history. Way back in 1872, some pushed to invade Korea, seeing the peninsula as essential for expansion. If Japan didn't act, ambitious Tsarist Russia might beat them to it. Then Japan would miss its chance. This got shot down by top officials like Ito Hirobumi, not because they loved peace, because Japan needed to focus on domestic reforms first. It wasn't the time to make enemies abroad. Of course, expansion plans weren't scrapped. They just couldn't move too fast. Under Ito's plan, Japan took a three-step approach to conquer Korea: diplomatic probing, political infiltration, and military force. First, in 1873, Emperor Meiji sent Soejima Taneyomi, a restoration leader and foreign minister, to China. Officially, he congratulated Emperor Guangxu on his wedding and taking power, but really tested China's stance on tributary states like Korea. After meeting Beijing officials like Prince Gong and Li Hongjiang, Soejima concluded China wouldn't easily give up suzerainty over Korea or Ryukyu, but wouldn't fight hard for them. So, in 1875, Japan boldly sent troops to Ryukyu, took it over by force, and 4 years later captured its king, renaming it Okinawa Prefecture, officially annexing it. Just as Soejima expected, the Qing government protested but did nothing more. The first step, going so smoothly, turned Meiji and his government's eyes toward Korea. Begin. Step 2. Diplomatic infiltration. Post-Meiji restoration, Japan's industry and commerce boomed, desperate for overseas markets to dump goods, and Korea was the perfect target. So the Meiji government sent envoys to Korea hoping to set up trade relations. Back then, Daewon-gun, who held power in Korea, rejected this request. The Meiji government immediately sent warships to demonstrate in Korean waters, forcing them to sign the Japan-Korea Treaty of Amity, also called the Treaty of Ganghwa. On paper, this was a friendly trade treaty opening both nations to each other. But since Korea was weak and couldn't trade much in Japan, the deal heavily favored Japan. So Japan, first forced open by Western gunboats, replicated the same coercion on its neighbor within decades. While opening Korea, the treaty hid another trap. It stated Korea was an independent nation equal to Japan. This diplomatic phrasing fundamentally denied Korea's status as China's tributary state. By international law norms, Japan now claimed equal rights with China in Korean affairs. The Qing Zhongli Yamen didn't take this seriously, planting seeds for future conflict. In 1883, exploiting the Sino-French War, Japan orchestrated the Gapsin coup through pro-Japanese Koreans to seize power. Though crushed quickly, Japan leveraged China's weakness to sign the Treaty of Tianjin with China and Treaty of Hansong with Korea. Not only could Japanese diplomats operate openly in Korea, but Japan also gained troop stationing rights. Japan's infiltration into Korea leaped forward. Japanese public fervor peaked. Even thinker Fukuzawa Yukichi urged immediate war with China to dominate Asia. But the Meiji government stayed far more rational than the public. Japan's weaponry still lagged behind at that point. The Beiyang fleet's 1886 Nagasaki visit jolted Emperor Meiji. After calculations, he avoided direct confrontation with China. To conquer Korea soon, Japan began frenzied military prep with China as the imaginary foe, like kids playing Sink the Dingjuan warship, or buying the cruiser Yoshino at any cost. Although we don't know if Emperor Meiji really ate just one meal a day to save money for warships like in some shows, he played a key role in pushing this forward. For example, to expand the Navy fast, the government under Ito Hirobumi wanted to cut official salaries to fund the military, but the House of Representatives opposed it.
Because under the separation of powers principle, the government can't cut Parliament's funds.
So Ito Hirobumi turned to Emperor Meiji for help. On February 10, 1893, Emperor Meiji issued an edict. Japan faces a huge threat and must boost its military strength. For 6 years from that day, he cut his own court expenses, putting 300,000 yen yearly into arms, and made all officials and lawmakers slash their pay by 10% to build warships. After the edict came out, the House of Representatives quickly obeyed and accepted the emperor's order. In a classic constitutional monarchy like Britain's, the monarch is just a figurehead, while government and parliament decisions really run the country. But as a student, Japan didn't copy this fully. The over 40 Emperor Meiji was no symbolic mascot. Though he didn't meddle in government ops under the Constitution, whenever he stepped in, everyone followed his rulings. This is a prime example. The Sino-Japanese War that followed is well known, so we'll skip the details here. But let's be clear, Emperor Meiji's wartime image wasn't kind and loving like after the Treaty of Shimonoseki. After signing the treaty, Emperor Meiji proclaimed in an edict that since taking the throne, he aimed for peace and felt sad he couldn't stop the China-Japan War. Plus, he earnestly taught people not to get arrogant from winning the war, scorn other nations, or lose allies' trust and affection. Actually, after the war started, Emperor Meiji dove into it with full passion. To stay better connected with the front, he moved the imperial headquarters from Tokyo to where the Japanese army launched their expedition. Hiroshima. There, he issued battle orders, attended victory banquets, and personally read out proclamations in public. The imperial decree stated Japan wouldn't stop advancing until achieving East Asian peace, urging all subjects to join efforts for swift victory. Emperor Meiji was obsessed with war, yet indifferent to all else, even his personal life. His Hiroshima residence was sparsely furnished, just desks, chairs, bookshelves, and office supplies. The only decoration was an inexpensive clock. Attendants suggested adding a stove against the cold, but Emperor Meiji refused. To avoid distraction, he even barred the empress and maids from visiting him in Hiroshima. In later wars, like the Russo-Japanese conflict and Boxer Rebellion, Japan openly displayed territorial ambitions. For Meiji, these campaigns brought concrete gains. One way, Japan occupied Korea, infiltrated Manchuria, and expanded territory. Second, wars demonstrated national strength and elevated Japan's global standing. In 1902, Japan signed an alliance treaty with Britain. Tying with the world's top power marked its transformed status. And as allies, they naturally scrapped previous unequal treaties. From the Anglo-Japanese alliance to 1911, Japan renegotiated equal treaties with Britain, France, America, Germany, and others. At 59, Emperor Meiji finally achieved his diplomatic goal. Japan now stood equal to Western powers. After joining imperial powers, Meiji's Japan slid toward militarist dictatorship, suppressing dissent and elevating military status. First, dissent suppression. Early Meiji restoration envisioned a Western-style democracy, shared by emperor, samurai, and commoners alike. By Meiji's end, Japan had drifted far from that original vision. Domestic repression became policy militarism. Domestic repression became policy. Meiji wrote poems stressing his love for peace. Lakes value harmony. Seas hold brothers. Why storms rise. War's purpose baffles me. Showing confusion toward enemies, misunderstanding his pain. Showing confusion toward enemies, misunderstanding his pain. Another poem. How many return from war? Smoke and sea mourn eternal pain. Mourning fallen soldiers. Just reading these, you'd think Emperor Meiji was a compassionate, benevolent ruler. So what was the reality? To opponents, Emperor Meiji was ruthless, best shown in the Anjung-gwen case and high treason incident. On October 26, 1909, Korean Anjung-gwen assassinated former PM Ito Hirobumi at Harbin Station. For years, people saw Anne as a patriot who killed Ito from anger over Japan annexing Korea. But according to Ames' jail memoir, he believed Meiji's war proclamations and poems. He thought Meiji didn't want to conquer Korea, but to unite East Asia against Western invaders. Korea's suffering under Japan was due to vile bureaucrats like Ito deceiving the emperor and ruining Japan-Korea friendship. He was sure his assassination would make the emperor see how wrong Ito's policies were. So Anne pinned Japan's crimes on Ito while glorifying Emperor Meiji. But he clearly misread Emperor Meiji. Before Anne's trial, Japan's foreign ministry had already ordered his death and immediate execution. Later, Emperor Meiji gave Ito a state funeral, showing his support. Ironically, a colonial subject died believing Meiji loved peace, while Japanese citizens didn't buy it. Japan's victories in foreign wars caused global shockwaves, but domestically, pride over beating powers faded fast. Huge casualties and economic losses deeply wounded many Japanese hearts. Many started questioning if these wars were truly meaningful. Works like Matsume Soseki's I Am a Cat and Yosano Akiko's Brother, You Must Not Die emerged then. This public gloom fueled Japan's nihilistic literature while politically manifesting as socialism. Socialism reached Japan in the late 19th century, gaining followers steadily. In 1901, Japan got its Socialist Party, the Social Democrats, led by Kotoku Shusui and Katayama Sen. Rapid industrialization grew Japan's working class, intensifying worker exploitation and oppression. The Social Democrats focused on spreading socialist ideas and organizing worker strikes. But soon, the Meiji government banned them, claiming Europe's socialist troubles required preemptive suppression. Japan had to crush it early with full force. During the Russo-Japanese War, Kotsuuki Shusui published articles slamming war tax hikes, landing him jail for harming national interests. After this, Japan's crackdown on political dissent turned harsher. Elder statesman Yamagata Aritomo pushed through the public order law, blatantly stripping citizens' rights to assemble, protest, or strike. In 1901, police uncovered a plot to assassinate Emperor Meiji. Allegedly planned by anarchists, the government used this to mass arrest socialists, including Kotoku and Katayama. Dubbed the High Treason Incident, 24 were sentenced to death, including unrelated Kotoku. Shocking, yet effectively crushing socialism. Post-trial, opposition dwindled, massively strengthening Meiji's autocracy. After silencing dissent, let's examine Meiji's second power move, elevating the military. Emperor Meiji's obsession with military strength was no secret. After ascending the throne, he often wore military uniforms at events, attended drills, and personally addressed cadets. Clearly passionate about military command, he dramatically boosted the army's status. First, the military wasn't the government's servant. For Japan's 1889 constitution, the emperor held supreme command, granting generals direct access to bypass civilian oversight. This meant military leaders could bypass the government cabinet and contact the emperor directly. This implied the government might lose military control. Oh, by wool.
Secondly, the military could determine if governments functioned.
In 1901, Meiji's cabinet regulations required army or navy ministers to be active officers, violating parliamentary ideals and enabling military meddling. If the military disliked a new elected government, they could withhold ministers, preventing its formation. If unhappy with policies, they could have ministers resign, collapsing the government. In his later years, Meiji believed his success came from commanding a fierce army. It toppled the Edo shogunate and subdued warlords. The army expanded territory overseas, freed Japan from unequal treaties, and secured its great power status. With the army, he'd never be a puppet again. This belief drove Meiji to elevate the military and deepen his ties with it in his final years. Even in his last month, he insisted on attending Army and Navy Academy graduations. Meiji strengthened military ties, partly for his heirs' sake. His wives bore 6 sons, 5 died young, only Prince Yoshihito survived, later Emperor Taisho. Though this sole heir was sickly from childhood, Meiji had no choice but to name him successor. Thus, Meiji's late-life power grabs paved the way for this fragile heir. But history unfolded unpredictably. Emperor Taisho couldn't wield power decisively like his father. By the Taisho era, the emperor no longer gripped the military. It manipulated politics autonomously, birthing a familiar term, militarism, though this term bared its fangs under Meiji's grandson Hirohito, the Showa era. But Meiji himself opened this Pandora's box, unleashing catastrophe across Asia decades later. On July 30th, 1912, early in the morning, Emperor Meiji's heart stopped beating. One of the most famous rulers in modern history, he completed his nearly 60 years of life. He witnessed Japan's entire journey, from backwardness to rise, and shaped its future direction. Shortly after his death, his coffin was transported back to Kyoto for burial. In 1920, the Meiji Shrine in Tokyo officially opened to the public, enshrining Emperor Meiji's spirit for people to worship. Today, every New Year, the Meiji Shrine front is still packed with people praying for Emperor Meiji to bless their New Year wishes. Yet his tomb in Kyoto remains neglected. Emperor Meiji and his era have grown increasingly distant. As poet Kusato Nakamura's Haiko writes, "Snow falls and light arrives, gradually fades." All right, that's all for Emperor Meiji's story. The reading notes are below the audio. See you next time.